Welcome, everybody, to the second episode of the 3 and Out podcast. I am Bryan Perez, and I want to thank you guys for checking in after what was a little bit more of a hiatus than I had expected. I took on a nasty chest cold, and it felt like a 12-round championship fight to get over it, but finally it tapped out, and we're ready to get back in the groove here. Before we get started on the topics that we want to discuss, I wanted to remind you guys, obviously check out draftbreakdown.com where you can learn more about NFL draft prospects in less time. Also, make sure you subscribe to our family of podcasts by searching the Draft Breakdown podcasts on iTunes. You could also find us on SoundCloud. With one subscription, you'll end up hearing the official Draft Breakdown podcast with Seth Cox, Justin Higdon, and Justice Mosqueda. You'll also get the 365 Draft podcast with Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino, and this 3 and Out podcast, which tonight I'm going to be flying solo, but hopefully over the next couple of shows we'll be bringing in some interviews, maybe even a co-host from here or there. But for the most part, it'll be my musings about the NFL draft, and whatever else is circulating through the social media, Twitter following that we all enjoy being a part of. Obviously, it goes without saying, when you get on draftbreakdown.com, please make sure you sign up for a membership on the site. It's free. It enables you to post mock drafts, scouting notes. You can even write your own draft articles, archive your work, share it with Twitter, share it with whomever you want, or just build your own portfolio that you can use as an online resume if you decide to go beyond just draft Twitter or the media side of draft analysis. It's a great resource, a great way to save your thoughts in one organized, easy to find place. So check it out in the upper right-hand corner of the draftbreakdown.com main menu. Click on the little buddy icon, set up your profile. Again, it's free, and it'll be a lot of fun to talk shop with everybody on Draft Breakdown throughout draft season. Today's show is going to focus on 4 things. The 3 and Out concept, pretty straightforward. First down, second down, third down, and then fourth down, which is usually a punt on a topic that either has me frustrated or just confused. Tonight we'll stick with that theme. And first down, I want to get right into the show tonight with a discussion about rookies in the NFL at a specific position, and 2 specific rookies at the running back position. And obviously we start with the 2 most popular players in last year's class at the position, Todd Gurley and Melvin Gordon. I wanted to touch on this because of my position on these players, or my stance on these players, going through last year's evaluation process and putting their scouting reports together, and ultimately the final grades for the draft guide that I published in the site formerly known as firstroundgrade.com. And I was an adamant Melvin Gordon guy. And, coming into the season, I fully expected Melvin Gordon to start pretty much the way Todd Gurley has started. And not that I didn't expect Todd Gurley to have early success, but the level of success that he's having does exceed the expectations that I had when I was evaluating them as college prospects. And I think this is important for anybody who covers the NFL draft or scouts talent or evaluates players. It's important to make sure you follow those evaluations into their pro careers. It's not, what have you done for me lately mentality if you want to get better at evaluating talent. You need to make sure that you remember the grades that you gave these guys. You constantly review your work, and you watch the evolution of the player in the pros to see what you may have misjudged or overrated or underrated when that player was going through the draft process. In the case of Melvin Gordon and Todd Gurley, I specifically earmarked these 2 guys as players that I was going to pay close attention to over the first 3 years of their career because of the nature of the debate leading up to last year's draft, when we finally had a class with 2 players at the running back position that warranted first-round consideration. And the general consensus within the draft media, within the scouting community, was that Todd Gurley was that borderline generational talent who, was a can't miss despite the potential durability issues, was a can't miss from a running back, checking the box standpoint. Whereas Melvin Gordon came under a little bit more scrutiny. Some people had questions about his vision. Some people had questions about, was he a system back like a lot of the Wisconsin running backs who came before him. But when I was watching the tape last year and evaluating these two guys and trying to tier them and ultimately create my running back board and the eventual big board, regardless of how much film, no matter how much film I watched, I always came out with Melvin Gordon as the better player. Melvin Gordon, to me, had an Eric Dickerson quality about him in college that I thought would transition to the NFL game smoothly. Every rookie is expected to have a learning curve, but I thought that Melvin Gordon's level of juice would lead to a lot of early success for him, whereas Todd Gurley, as great as he was, and it was not, it was almost irrefutable evidence on tape that this guy was going to be a stud. I may have been a little trigger shy on him from the Trent Richardson experience because I looked at Todd Gurley and saw a player who I wasn't totally convinced had the necessary quickness in his feet to transition to a pro game where, those first few steps behind the line of scrimmage are critical. And I also had major concerns about his durability. I mean, he was a guy who came into the league with already having busted a knee, and he had some ankle issues the year before that. And obviously, when you start talking about a player whose wheels are nicked up at a position like running back, you have to be a little bit cautious. It's not to say that I wasn't high on Todd Gurley. To put it in perspective, I had Melvin Gordon and Todd Gurley both ranked in the top 10 overall for the entire class. So it was a fun year to grade running backs because two of them, actually I also had Duke Johnson in the top 10. There were 3 running backs in my overall top 10 players last year. But I had Melvin Gordon clearly ahead of Todd Gurley. So as a person who takes pride in his work and obviously always strives to get better at what I do, no matter what it is, whether it's my private practice of law or it's evaluating talent for an NFL draft, you want to make sure that if you missed on something or if you fail to acknowledge something else, that you learn from that. And we're not there yet. I mean, we're only 6-7 games into these guys' careers, and it's far from, the first chapter of their NFL career, the story of their NFL career has not even been written yet. I mean, we're in like the table of contents at this point. But when a guy like Todd Gurley has the kind of start to his career that he has, you can't help but take a step back and say, wait a second, did I underrate a guy? Even though I had him in the top 10 with a very high first-round grade, did I underrate him? Gurley's starting the year with 74 carries, 442 yards, 2 touchdowns. His games, the last 3 games that he's had, I mean, I don't remember a rookie running back except for Cadillac Williams, who he kind of did it in a different way. I don't remember a rookie running back doing what Todd Gurley's doing in all the years that I've been watching football. I mean, against the Cardinals, 19 for 146. Against the Packers, 30 for 159. Against the Browns, 19 for 128 and 2 touchdowns. Cardinals, he had a 52-yard run. Packers, a 55-yard run. Browns, a 48-yard run. I mean, this is crazy stuff. And when I watched Gurley closely last week, I watched every one of his carries. The most impressive part about Todd Gurley's game right now is how easy it is for him to break tackles. I mean, it almost looks like he has Vaseline on his legs, on his pads, because guys literally slide off of him. It's as if they simply cannot wrap up Todd Gurley on any level, whether they try to hit him high or hit him low. He's just shattering arm tackles, breaking through arm tackles as if, like I said, he has some kind of foreign substance on his pads. And one of the things I noticed about Gurley, when you just look at his physical makeup, and it's not that you couldn't see this on his college tape, but when you look at his physical makeup here in the pros, the size of his rear end and thighs and the lower body composition that he has, it's unique in the sense that it's so thick and well built that it's a real challenge for a defensive back, a linebacker, somebody on the second or third level to have any chance of wrapping him up if they go low on him. And when he's, guy 6'1", 227 pounds, a lot of that being from the waist down, that's an impressive combination. And one of the things that we really didn't get with Todd Gurley because of the nature of his injury was a lot of measurables and testing numbers, and he's clearly showing that he's got the juice to take a third-level run and take it to the house. It's exciting stuff, what we're seeing with Todd Gurley. It's exciting because we haven't seen a player at this position at his young age and only 21 years old, pretty much take over the league at the position. Maybe Adrian Peterson was the last guy that did it in such convincing fashion. Look at a guy like Jeremy Hill last year. I was very low on Jeremy Hill coming out into the pros. After this first 16 games as a pro, I started second-guessing my evaluation on him. This year, his sophomore season, he hasn't been nearly as exciting of a player, and he hasn't been nearly as effective. So again, that's why the old adage is you got to wait 3 years before you make a final assessment on your own work. And year 1, Jeremy Hill looked like a miss on my evaluation. Year 2, Jeremy Hill looks like I might have been dead on about him. Year 3 will probably be the year that breaks the tie. So Todd Gurley, despite the fact that he has had an unbelievable start to his career, we got to be careful to crown him as the greatest running back to ever enter the NFL, because this week his durability issues could rear their ugly head. He could end up suffering an unfortunate injury, which is part of his scouting report. Part of the honest evaluation on Todd Gurley is that he came into the league with a checkered injury history. You have to factor that into your grade. So if he has, when healthy, if he's a 6 yard per carry guy when he's healthy, that's great. But if he only gives you 10 games a year, how valuable is that? So we have to wait to see, can Todd Gurley do this over the next 13 games over a course of 13 games that he has on his resume this year, over the next 10 games of the season, or however many games are left for him to be able to play. And can he put these kind of numbers up all year long? If he has a rookie year where he doesn't miss any time, doesn't get banged up, doesn't get nicked up, kind of answers those questions, which would be astronomical and phenomenal if he's able to do that less than 1 year. He's not even a year removed yet from his knee injury. I mean, put that in perspective. That would be something else. And all the analysts who dubbed him as a generational talent after 1 year, if he keeps up this pace, you know what? My hat's off to them, because they're probably dead on the money. Now you look at Melvin Gordon. Melvin Gordon's the guy that I thought would be like an Eric Dickerson pro, which, that's high praise. Eric Dickerson's a rare breed, and you would have had a hard time convincing me otherwise when I was watching Melvin Gordon's college tape that he wouldn't be that kind of a player in the league. And this is the perfect example of how despite underwhelming stats, you could still find a lot of positives in his game. And I've been very careful not to go fishing in an expedition to find, positives just to validate my own scouting report, because I'm very honest with myself and my personal review of my work. When I watch Melvin Gordon run right now, I'm very impressed by this player. The biggest issue that he has going for him is ball security, and ball security can get you a one-way ticket out of the NFL. So there is no excuse for that, and if he keeps putting the ball on the ground, well, it's an absolute swing and a miss on my evaluation of him. Assuming he can get that under control, assuming he can be a reliable running back in terms of not turning the ball over. When I watch Gordon's reps, and I've watched every carry of his this season, he's had 85 carries, 328 yards. He hasn't hit pay dirt yet. He's averaging 3.9 yards per carry. I see a guy that when there's a hole there, when he's got a crease to run through, he hits it quickly, he hits it hard, he runs with very good pad level, he's cracking pads on contact, he's making guys pay who want to come in and try to tackle him in space, he's making guys miss. And then when he gets past that second level, you could see him turning on that juice. Eventually, he's going to hit the big runs. I mean, it's just a matter of time for him. And if the San Diego Chargers can get their offensive line straightened out, I mean, you are looking at a guy who's going to put up big, big numbers in the NFL. I tweeted out about Melvin Gordon a couple days ago, and because I see a lot of negativity when it comes to Melvin Gordon and his probably less than ideal start as a pro. But everybody probably would agree that Le'Veon Bell is the best running back in the NFL right now. And when you go back and look at his rookie season, the guy averaged 3.5 yards a carry. And, some may say, well, he's a different player now than he was then. Well, of course, players evolve. And that's all part of the 3-year theory, the 3-year evolution of a college prospect into a pro. And you'll know what you got after 3 years. If you wrote the book on Le'Veon Bell after his rookie season, you probably would have said, pretty good running back, pretty good all-around, all-purpose running back, power back, a grinder between the tackles, 3.5 yards a carry. Look at Le'Veon Bell now. He's one of the prettiest runners with the football in his hand. I don't remember a running back who was as patient as Le'Veon Bell, as quick to react off blocks as Le'Veon Bell, who has transformed his physical appearance to enhance his natural running style the way Le'Veon Bell did. He has learned what it takes to be successful in the NFL, and he didn't just get that athleticism overnight. I know there was a lot of people that were down on Le'Veon Bell when he was coming out of college. I personally had him graded as a high second-round pick, and that's where he ended up going, to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I remember, game after game, Le'Veon Bell hurdling defenders. Big guy back in college, big, thick running back in college, hurdling defenders. And I'm not just talking about guys going at his knees. I mean, some of these guys were standing straight up, and he was able to hurdle over them like an Olympic athlete. I mean, he's always had that athletic ability, and he's always had that footwork. He's just mastered his craft now in the pros. And Melvin Gordon, I think you're probably going to see a rookie year where he hovers around that 4 yards a carry, 4.1, 3.9, 4.2, 4.0. He'll probably hover around there at the end of when it's all said and done. Maybe he hits 900 yards, 3-4 touchdowns. But there's a lot of positives that he's putting on tape right now. And you could just see it. You could just see he has it. It's just a matter of certain things lining up right for him to really take, the step like a Le'Veon Bell took from year 1 to year 2. Todd Gurley has come into the league on a team. Offensive line is a little more cohesive, a little more talented, and he just fit. I mean, they're using him as that downhill runner and letting him do his thing. I'm not quite sold on the way the San Diego Chargers are using Melvin Gordon right now. I would like to see them use him more of a downhill type of attack, but it is what it is. You'd hope that the coaching staff could eventually end up figuring out how to use him, and hopefully his talent just naturally takes over. But, I mean, he's 6'1", 215. He runs like a thoroughbred in the open field. He's running with really good pad level. He's making guys miss. Don't jump off the Melvin Gordon train before it's even left the station, folks. This kid is going to be, top 5 running back before it's all said and done. And I know it's a bold statement without seeing much of anything from him at this point in his career from the SportsCenter highlight standpoint. But if you really get down and watch the film and watch him run by run, you're going to find clips. I know there's guys that are infamous on Twitter for putting the clips out there of a guy that may have missed a hole, missed a read, made a bad cut, didn't see the open lane. Listen, this is football, guys. I mean, if we wanted to find, a clip in every game of Le'Veon Bell making a bad cut, or a clip in every game of Matt Forte not running through an arm tackle. I mean, you could do that about every single player at every single position. It's not about looking at one play here or there. It's looking at an overall body of work. And I think there's a lot of positives in what Melvin Gordon's done so far, despite the ball security issues. So it's going to be fun to watch these two guys, and I truly recommend to anybody who enjoys getting involved with, scouting, film study, projecting guys from college game to the NFL draft. Don't stop after you filed your scouting report with a specific website or you finish your draft guide. That shouldn't be the end of the analysis. The analysis crosses over from the college game to the pro game, so you can learn about certain things that you need to bring back to your analysis for the next year. A guy like Jeremy Hill made me think twice about the grades I give to those big backs that seem to rely more on power than anything else, and those big backs that rely on power, but he wasn't overwhelmingly powerful in my assessment on the college game. I looked at him like a guy that was going to come into the league and his max upside would be like a Cedric Benson. Maybe that's what we saw out of him last year when Cedric Benson kind of had the perfect storm, ironically, in Cincinnati and looked like he was going to be a pretty good player for them in that 1 or 2 year stint that he had there. Maybe we're looking at the same thing with Jeremy Hill. Who knows? But again, Todd Gurley, man, this guy is something else, and he's going to be fun to watch over the next couple of years. Melvin Gordon, like I said, his time is yet to come. It's going to be a really fun process to watch these two guys as their career goes on. Let's get into second down, which is college quarterbacks. The Draft Breakdown podcast crew, Justin, Seth, and actually they had a special guest host, Jeff Risdon, who, for my money, Jeff Risdon, if you don't follow him, I don't know what's wrong with you. You should follow him immediately. He's at Jeff Risdon. He's one of the best draft analysts, in my opinion, on Twitter. I mean, he's been doing the college football scouting watch guide for us every week of the college season this year, and we're going to have a lot more of his NFL draft work as the draft season approaches. I mean, the guy is as thorough as it gets. He probably knows just about every player eligible in the draft. He's been around for a long time, so he's got references like Michael Dean Perry in the last show, which that's right up my alley. And he was part of the show last week where they were talking about quarterbacks, and Paxton Lynch is obviously the flavor of the month for the quarterback-starved draft enthusiast, because as I talked about in a previous show, the draft is just a lot more fun when we have quarterbacks. I mean, there is no substitute for the drama, the intrigue, and the interest in an NFL draft when there's quarterbacks involved. If you take quarterbacks out of the top part of the first round, the draft just is not as fun. So what's happening, and what always happens, is the draft media, analysts, scouts, bloggers, TV personalities, you end up latching on to a quarterback or two, a name here and there, to keep the excitement, the intrigue, and the drama going. I mean, look what happened to Geno Smith a couple years ago where, there was the shock that he didn't go in the first round and all the green room, television drama. I mean, Geno Smith wasn't a first-round quarterback. That wasn't a shock and it wasn't a surprise. But he was built up as one throughout the draft process. Some guys on draft Twitter liked him as a first-rounder. ESPN, whatever, talked about him as a possible first-round pick, and he just wasn't that guy. So this brings us to Paxton Lynch, who suddenly has emerged as many analysts' top quarterback, has emerged as now a first-round pick, is beginning to slowly overtake guys like Jared Goff and Connor Cook as the best quarterback in the class. I watched the Paxton Lynch footage that we have on draftbreakdown.com, and there were moments where I was very impressed. I mean, Paxton Lynch definitely made some wow throws where you say to yourself, that's a guy that you want under center on Sundays, 3rd and 9, to fire the ball to your receiver, 15 to 17 yards downfield. Absolutely, the guy can get it done. He's got the juice in his arm. He's got the velocity, throws a tight spiral on some reps. But I don't know if I'm seeing something that nobody else is seeing or nobody else is talking about it, but there are other reps where Paxton Lynch throws those wobbling, floating, Nerf-like balls that seem to just, sail over his receivers' heads. Now, someone on Twitter accurately pointed out, that's a very good point, that Lynch has some short receivers, meaning not tall. And that's true. And maybe if his receivers were 6'2.5", 6'3", passes that currently look inaccurate and sail over the receivers' heads would be a nice catch by the receiver and not look as glaringly bad for the quarterback. And who knows? I mean, there's a lot that goes into the analysis of a ball here and there, but I don't see the consistency from rep to rep with Paxton Lynch to suggest he's the guy. I see the upside in rep to rep with Paxton Lynch to suggest he's an intriguing guy. He's an interesting guy. He's a guy I want to study more and probably could see going in very early portion of day 2 in the NFL draft right now. There's a lot of season left. This guy can go on a tear and make some of the most eye-opening throws that we've seen all year and just continue to elevate his stock as he's obviously doing now. Right now he's completing almost 72% of his passes. He's thrown for 2,366 yards, 17 touchdowns, only 1 interception. I mean, that is phenomenal. That is rarefied air from a touchdown to interception ratio. You want to see 4 or 5 to 1 touchdowns to interceptions from a guy that you'd consider taking in the first round. 17 to 1. I mean, it's not even normal. That's just bizarre. It's so good, it's just bizarre. But at the same time, I mean, you listening out there in Neverland is probably saying to yourself, well, Bryan, you just said that you don't see consistency from rep to rep at Paxton Lynch, yet he completes 72% of his passes. I mean, that's a guy that's throwing a completion 7 to 8 times every 10 times he throws the ball. Yeah, absolutely. But a completion doesn't necessarily mean the guy is making a great throw. I mean, we all know that, right? If you study the draft, you know that, just because the ball was completed doesn't necessarily mean it's an NFL Sunday throw. Also, when you got quick screens, quick hitters, and whatnot, it just naturally inflates the completion percentage. And some of Lynch's passes would qualify for that classification. Again, I would just welcome you guys out there to just take a closer look at Lynch's film. Tell me if I'm crazy. Maybe I'm off my rocker right now. I just don't see the overwhelming evidence to suggest he's the best quarterback right now. A disclaimer for everyone out there. It doesn't mean that after deeper, more intensive film study, especially as we get to the winter months, and if he declares for the draft, it doesn't mean that after more intense film study, I won't have an evolution in my own opinion where I say, you know what, I've seen enough. This guy is QB1 for this draft, top 10 pick. Like I said, I have a lot more film to watch on him, but I'm just a little surprised that there is such an outpouring of fandom for his game right now from draft analysts. You compare him to Jared Goff. Jared Goff has 66% completion, 65.5, 20 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. He's thrown for 2,265 yards. Again, 20 to 9. That's not a good touchdown to interception ratio for a quarterback that some would suggest is the top quarterback in the draft. 20 to 9 is just over 2 to 1. That's not good enough. On my board, that's not good enough. That means for every 2 touchdowns he throws, he's throwing a pick. And I don't like those odds when I'm in the red zone or I need a critical touchdown throw from my quarterback, because I want to know that the guy coming out of college was 4 or 5 times more likely to throw a touchdown than an interception on any given spot. Jared Goff isn't there. But again, numbers can be deceiving. He had a terrible, 5 interception game a few weeks ago where he, I can bring it up right now, against Utah. He was 25 of 47, 340 yards, 2 touchdowns, 5 picks. I mean, it was probably the worst game that a quarterback jockeying for number 1 pick overall status could put on film. He made terrible decisions, threw interceptions at the worst possible time on the field. And it really is something that you can't necessarily forget. Also, when you look at the rest of his games, I mean, he's only had 2 games this year without an interception. That's against Texas, and their defense is nothing necessarily to write home about, and against UCLA. In those 2 contests, he didn't throw an interception, but every other game he has at least 1, and Utah, he had 5. 5 interceptions in a game. I mean, that's a crazy number, right? That's a number that if I'm a general manager and I'm deciding on whether or not this player is the future of my franchise at the position, I'm watching that tape more than any other tape on his resume to see if the mistakes he was making are mistakes that can be corrected with coaching and experience and reps and whatnot. My opinion on that is they can be, and that he is a very, very good quarterback prospect and worthy of first-round consideration. I've watched a lot more of his tape. I'm very impressed by his arm. I don't quite get, again, I see on draft Twitter a lot of guys questioning Jared Goff's arm strength. I don't really know what you're looking for in a quarterback's arm strength if you don't think Goff has enough of it. I know that sometimes he can get a little bit off with his footwork, and again, a ball could come out without the velocity that you may want to see from him. But he has a heck of a lot more wow throws on his tape where it's just, it's a frozen rope. I don't know what you're looking for in a quarterback's arm if you don't think Goff has it. He's a player that I think if he declares, he's going to be a top 10 pick, barring any kind of nuclear meltdown here in the second part of the season. And if he has that kind of meltdown, he's just going to go back to school for his senior year. I think right now, my money would be on him coming out, but it's not as clear as a bet as I would have said on October 3rd, which is the week before his Utah game where he had 5 picks. That's a game that he really has to go on a tear here down the stretch to get teams to forget about. Otherwise, if he keeps throwing a pick here, 2 picks there, a pick here, he's probably going to receive advice from his coaches, his family, or whatnot. He's got to go back to school. He's got to get a better year of tape on film where he doesn't make as many mistakes, because that's going to be something that definitely hurts his stock. But as of right now, I would say he will come out because I don't expect him to melt down. And if he does come out, I think there will be enough quarterback-needy teams in the first part of the draft where Goff is going to be a top 10 pick. He's a 6'4" kid. He's weighing in at 215, 220 right now. He'll probably put on another 10 or 15 pounds in the pros. That equates to a prototype quarterback for the NFL. He's got everything you look for. I love how he goes through his progressions. He's a smart kid. He's got everything you want in his arm. Top 10 pick, no doubt about it. So I don't see why, or how a guy like Paxton Lynch all of a sudden can leapfrog that. Time will tell, obviously, when we break it all down. And obviously the third quarterback that everybody talks about when they talk about quarterbacks for the draft is Connor Cook. Connor Cook is an interesting guy because when you look at Connor Cook's performance on the field, you say this is an NFL quarterback. I mean, he makes some of those back shoulder throws. He looks like a veteran player, a veteran, upper tier, not top tier like elite top 3 or 4 player, but that top 8 range, top 9 range, top 10, top third of the NFL. He could be that kind of quarterback. He looks like that on game day on Saturdays when you're watching as a casual fan. But then when you break it down and you really get into his film and you see that he's not even completing 58% of his passes this year. And he's never hit 60% completion percentage in any year of his career. You say to yourself, that's kind of odd. That stat doesn't feel like it matches what I'm watching when I'm watching as a casual fan. You put in the game tape and you watch him every week and you almost say, all right, you forgive him for some of the, he should have made that throw, missed an open receiver, underthrew that guy, overthrew that guy. You almost forgive him at times because he makes some of those NFL passes, some of those vet passes that you say, you know what, that's a guy, that's an NFL Sunday throw. That's what you want to see from a quarterback prospect. That's a player that could start in the NFL. Connor Cook could be one of those guys that mesmerizes you with some of those throws and makes you forget about a lot of the warts that are on his tape, screaming loud and clear a potential warning about his average quarterbacking ability. I don't have a final opinion on this. I'm not saying I think he's an average quarterback, but I would put up that caution flag to say, dig a little deeper in Connor Cook if you're starting to study him. He has a similar to Paxton Lynch quarterback touchdown to interception ratio. His is 17-2. Lynch is 17-1. But 17-2, again, there's a guy. He's 8 to 9 times more likely to throw a touchdown than an interception this year. Last year it was 24-8. Was that 3-1? Year before that, 22-6. 3.5-1. So this year he's having that big year of mistake-free football. That's what you want to show scouts before you make the leap into the pros. He's got no choice. He's going to be declaring for the NFL draft at the end of the year. But he's showing scouts, I'm not making quote-unquote mistakes. I'm protecting the ball. I'm still not hitting 60% of my passes, but I'm not throwing any interceptions either. That's improvement. That's progress, right? He's getting some help from some good receiver play. He's got a pretty good offensive line. I'd like to see him go on a stretch here where he completes some more passes. Let's break down Connor Cook's game log real quick. Week 1 against Western Michigan, he didn't even hit 50% completions, 15-31. Week 2, 62.5%. Week 3, 65.2%. That was against Air Force. Week 4, 57.9%. Against Purdue the following week, 19 throws, hit 68.4% of them. It's not a lot. It's only 13 completions in a game. I mean, all right, he almost hit 70%, but he only threw the ball 19 times. Against Rutgers, 61.5%. Not terrible. He threw the ball 39 times, completed 24 of them. Not terrible. But then he follows that up against Michigan. 46.2% completion percentage on 39 throws in one of the biggest games of his senior season. That's not good. I mean, that's just, again, like we talked about Jared Goff having a 5-interception game and putting on tape that, is one that scouts are going to pore over when trying to decide if this is a guy to invest the future of your franchise with. Completing not even 50% of your balls against Michigan. You got to study that tape closely. And then last week against Indiana, 57.7%. So you see, Connor Cook is what he is. I mean, we don't have a bunch of 68% completion games and some anomaly where he completed 41%, 40%, and it brought his whole season average down. I mean, he is what he is. He's right in that range. He has 1, 2, 3, 4 games where he didn't even hit 60% completions. He has no games this year at 70%. Everything else is somewhere in between. He is what he is. So let's see how Connor Cook can finish the year. Let's see how this quarterback group, ultimately resolves this, the jockeying for the QB1 spot. It's going to come down to one of these three guys. I think the ship is obviously sailed on Cardale. And I'm not quite sure there's any other quarterbacks that can challenge at this point. It's fun to have three guys that we're talking about, though, all the way as we toward the end of October. We're on the verge of starting November. So to have three quarterbacks still in the discussion means that it'll be a fun end of the year, and hopefully all these guys end up declaring for the pros for the NFL draft, if obviously they finish the year as well as they've started it. And we got some interesting guys to study through the combine and beyond. Third down. I tweeted out the request for questions. Not questions, but really kind of like topics to discuss for this show. And one of the ones that I took note of was Jeff Risdon. Again, this is like, I'm like a Jeff Risdon fanboy today. But one of the ones I took note of was Jeff Risdon's, where he asked about any players. He phrased it as prospects that have caught my eye. But I decided to kind of rephrase it as any players this year that have somewhat, caught my eye and have made me really take notice of their performance. And the one guy that I think qualifies for that, it's kind of hard not to take notice of this guy, is the freshman running back on Penn State, Saquon Barkley. I mean, have you guys taken notice of what this kid is doing? I mean, it seems to me like, when Nick Chubb was a freshman, when Todd Gurley was a freshman, when a lot of these big-time backs were freshmen and they were putting up gaudy numbers, we heard about it weekly. And I know that Barkley's been banged up. He missed a couple games, but let's again, kind of like we just did with Connor Cook, let's take a look at what this kid has been able to do when given carries. Week 1, he only had 1 carry. Week 2 against Buffalo, 12 carries, 115 yards, and a touchdown, 9.6 yards a carry. The next week against Rutgers, 21 carries, 195 yards, 9.3 yards a carry, 2 touchdowns. San Diego State, 8 carries, 62 yards, got banged up in that game, but still averaged 7.8 yards a carry. Misses 2 games, comes back against Ohio State, the Ohio State, 26 carries, 194 yards, 7.5 yards a carry. And then this past week, he had a little bit of a hiccup against Maryland, 20 carries, 65 yards, only 3 1/3 per rush. But this freshman has 88 carries for 632 yards. He's averaging 7.2 yards a carry in this freshman season. 2 of his games, he averaged 9.3 yards a carry or more. I mean, if you think about that, every time he touches the ball, he's basically running for a first down. I mean, that's like Pop Warner stuff. Box score scouting is obviously the most dangerous thing that any analyst can do. So what do? You see these numbers, you look at the film. And I took a look at his game against Ohio State, and my goodness, we're looking at a potential superstar at the running back position. And I think that's a running theme as of late here in college football. I mean, we know Fournette, Chubb unfortunately got banged up. Look at McCaffrey at Stanford. The list goes on and on of these kids that are going to, Dalvin Cook down in Florida State. And this guy's going to be right in that. He's going to be discussed in the same breath. Saquon Barkley, we're talking about 2 years before he could be an NFL draft prospect. We're not even 2018 is where we'll be looking at him, and if hopefully he could stay healthy and avoid some of these unfortunate injuries that have been plaguing some running backs. Nick Chubb, obviously the most recent. But when you watch him against Ohio State, he does things that are very Todd Gurley-ish, very Le'Veon Bell-ish. His ability to stop and start on a dime, run with power. He's got a thick lower half, breaking through arm tackles. His legs are like two pistons. And he's got a third year. He could take it to the house. I mean, this kid's an impressive player. So in response to Jeff's question, I would say the one guy that I'm really excited about this year and who I really want to watch with a closer scouting eye down the stretch this year and beyond is Barkley from Penn State. Penn State to me, growing up, I have a special place in my heart for the Penn State program because my cousin, Frank Giannetti, was an All-American defensive end at Penn State when I was a young kid. And we had a really unique experience growing up where we were able to go to Penn State games and met Joe Paterno, and we were in the locker room and in the players' dorms, and it was a really fun way to be indoctrinated basically into football as such a young kid, middle schooler. So Penn State has always held a special place in my heart, in just from a college football perspective. It's not my team. I don't have a team that I cheer for, but one of the things that excites me when I watch Penn State is when they have a good running back. It just seems like college football is right. The equilibrium is set when they have a pretty good running back or a really good running back. Go back to Curtis Enos, the bust he was for my Chicago Bears, but man, he was fun to watch at Penn State. Blair Thomas. That's going way back. Some of you guys probably don't even know the name, but he was the first-round pick of the New York Jets many, many years ago. Kajana Carter, the number one pick overall as a running back to the Cincinnati Bengals. And the list goes on and on. Some guys not necessarily as high profile, but equally as fun to watch on the college ranks. So it looks like Barkley is going to be the next in line of some pretty impressive, running back, a pretty impressive history of running backs at Penn State, and he's clearly going to be the centerpiece of that program moving forward, and hopefully will provide them with a spark to get even more wins and become a little more relevant now as we get more further beyond all of these scandal and major damage that was done to that program over the Sandusky issues. But I would say Saquon Barkley, that guy, he's my guy. He's a guy that I'm going to be watching and hopefully continues on the path that he's on, because what I've seen in just a few games, he's rare. He reminds you of when you saw Dalvin Cook last year play for Florida State, you knew this kid was just special. And here he is in his sophomore season, and he's just even more special than he was last year. And coming into his junior year, he's going to be a guy that I don't know any college defense in the country that'll be able to stop him with another year of maturity, another year of physical growth, another year in the program. I mean, it's just going to be disgusting to watch, to be quite honest. But so yeah, hopefully that answers Jeff's request in terms of the players I'm looking at. Jeff also asked me about comping Laremy Tunsil and Ronnie Stanley and some of these other guys. And to be quite honest, I'm not, until I put up a full scouting report of guys, until I break down enough tape and feel comfortable with a final assessment, I don't necessarily want to give a definitive answer comping one guy versus the next. So rather than be a little wishy-washy like I was with the quarterbacks, I'm going to kind of hold that topic of conversation for another show down the line. And now we get to fourth down. And this is where I punt. My offense is, 3 yards in a cloud of dust. And every week I punt the ball. But I'm going to punt this week on something that really annoys the hell out of me. And it's sideline outbursts. Guys that get paid millions of dollars to be professional athletes and act like absolute children on national television on the sidelines of an NFL game. I mean, think about something. These are grown men, okay? These are grown men who are paid more money than most of us could ever imagine making. And the football field is their workplace. It's their work environment. And if any of us reacted the way Greg Hardy reacted last weekend to something that we may not like that's happening in our work environment, we'd be fired on the spot. But Greg Hardy, for some reason, isn't. And he's not even investigated or reprimanded. And it just got me thinking about how ridiculous and insincere the NFL is with their whole claim of integrity and the integrity of the shield and integrity of the game and all this stuff, and how we had to go through months and months of absolute torture on this Deflategate debacle with Tom Brady and an underinflated football, to the point where one of the best players of our generation is facing a 4-game suspension, to the point where one of the highest profile athletes in the world has his reputation and character dragged through the mud. A guy who's never been on a police blotter, a guy who you never hear about in the clubs and the strip clubs and doing anything that would make you not want your children to idolize him. A guy that, yeah, all right, maybe he deflated the footballs a little bit. But I think one thing is pretty obvious of what he's doing this year is he's proving that it didn't matter. Even if the ball was a little deflated at his request, I don't think that that's what gave him a competitive advantage over the Indianapolis Colts. I think what gave him a competitive advantage over the Indianapolis Colts was the fact that he's one of the best quarterbacks who's ever played the game. And he's tearing the league up this year to prove a point. He's not a cheater. He didn't cheat. He maybe made, scuffed the ball up. Same concept. Made it more comfortable and to his liking. But they didn't change the way the guy was going to quarterback on a Sunday. But look how the NFL attacked him. And look how the NFL has basically created a witch hunt to tear down Tom Brady. Roger Goodell comes out and says there will be no NFL involvement in the Greg Hardy outburst on the sideline. A man who served a 4-game suspension because of a domestic violence issue, a guy who clearly acted as irrationally and immaturely as you would want a professional athlete to behave on national television. That outburst is something I would not want my children to see. I have 2 sons, a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. I want them to watch Tom Brady play football. I do not want them to watch Greg Hardy play football. I do not want them to know who Greg Hardy is or why he was suspended. And yet Greg Hardy will be suiting up this Sunday and getting after the quarterback. At some point, the teams, the NFL, the ownership, they have to value character over production. And we'll never see it. I mean, I'm not, an idiot. I know that that's never going to happen. But there has to be a point in time where enough is enough. I mean, we saw it, over the years. Terrell Owens probably was the first and most notable example of a player who couldn't control himself on the sidelines, and it was an every week thing. Him versus Jeff Garcia, whoever else was the quarterback in place at the time, and then he goes to Philadelphia, and him and he's best friends with Donovan McNabb for a year or two, and then they're arch rivals and enemies and whatnot. And then he goes to Dallas, and he has his issues there in Dallas. The guy was always a sideshow, but he was one of the best receivers of his time. And you look at Dez Bryant. Dez Bryant, kind of the Greg Hardy before Greg Hardy on the Dallas Cowboys sidelines. He's evolved a little bit, though. He seems like he's coming around and evolving as a person, which people, there are players like Brandon Marshall, who has gone from probably one of the biggest cancers on a sideline to a player who is establishing himself as a role model for younger receivers to prove you can mature. You can find the right path. I know he had an issue as recently as maybe last week with someone on the sideline, but not to the extent of a public embarrassment the way Greg Hardy. I mean, Greg Hardy was just pathetic to watch. It was pathetic. The NFL refuses to do anything about it. They refuse to suspend him again. They refuse to issue any kind of fines. So the NFL, to me, you know what? you've lost credibility. Roger Goodell, you've dropped the ball on this. You're too concerned with winning a battle of pride and principle versus Tom Brady instead of focusing on guys like Greg Hardy and making it a game that guys like me would be proud to show to my 6- and 3-year-old sons. You got to get your act together, Roger Goodell, because I don't know how much longer, the fan base or even the ownership is going to be able to stick around and support you when your decisions and your ability to logically see what is important to maintain the integrity of the game versus what is not important to go after and adjudicate to try to establish a point. At the end of the day, Greg Hardy, you should be ashamed of yourself. That'll do it for this episode of the 3 and Out podcast. Hopefully within the next 2 weeks, we'll have another episode up. Until then, make sure you keep checking out draftbreakdown.com. Subscribe to the iTunes channel. All the other podcasts will be loading as they're published. And I really do appreciate you taking the time to listen to me ramble for the last 51 minutes. Next week, hopefully I'll have a guest or two on, maybe even a co-host helping me navigate through the murky waters of draft Twitter and the NFL in general. Until then, everybody, have a great week or two, and I'll talk to you soon.